That is Robin, seconded by Greg. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We are back in session. We'll start with the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following the minutes of the special and regular meetings held on June 24th, 2025? That's Robin, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to discussion, presentations, discussions, and possible actions. We'll start with discussion on long-term fiscal planning and the fiscal year 27 budget. And I will take that directly to you, Eric and Rich.
Okay, hope everybody had a good lunch. So obviously, a weekend, I've done some early learning on the budget process and some of the drivers and what we envision today to be. Rich has really put together some helpful information as we think from that 30,000 feet view at an early state of time where we are and what some of the more significant drivers and challenges that we will be facing once we get into the budget process. So I don't necessarily see this as us getting into a meat of a discussion about the building of the budget yet. We're not there yet, but this is certainly to sort of put things on the radar for discussion at a later point and things that we'll be having to navigate as we build this proposed budget for FY27. So Rich, take it away. Thank you.
So obviously the biggest part of the budget for next year remains unknown, and that is the teacher contract, which expires at the end of the current fiscal year. I would imagine our settlement will be roughly in line with what we've seen in the past. And so if we look at what that would be, you're looking at probably something in the range of 1.85 to 2% of your actual budget. So if nothing else changes, your budget's probably going to go up by 1.85 to 2%, depending on where that settlement is. Obviously, we have other union agreements with the administrators, the custodians, the maintenance, the paras, the nurses, and the secretaries. That's about 3/4 of a point as well. And so just with those two items, you're at about a 2.6. Something that we've obviously talked a lot about in the last few years is health insurance. In the last 3 years, we got a 7, we got almost a 14 and almost a 12. If you're looking at health insurance, every point is roughly $150,000. So depending on where health insurance goes, if you're looking at like kind of an average of where we've been in the last 3 years, you're looking at 10%. A lot will depend on how our claims look, plan design looks, but a 10% increase with the same head count, you're looking at another 1.2% on your budget as well. So the things obviously add up quickly. We do have some grants that are set to expire. Teen Talk was funded partially in this current school year through a grant that will expire. So if the board wishes to continue that program at the middle school, it'll have to fund that gap. The wellness corner at the high school, it started in a grant and it was 1/3 in the board's budget and 2/3 in a grant. This year it's 2/3 in the board's budget, 1/3 in a grant. Next year, if it's continue, it'll have to be fully funded by the board's budget. And then currently Title II and Title III have been rescinded by the federal government. That money is on pause. Title II is $32,000, so it's a small portion of our budget, but it does fund professional development. So if that remains rescinded, that is a budgetary gap as well. In the last budget cycle, we did have some reductions to technology. If we were to just follow the standard replacement cycle, that's a $690,000 increase to the budget or a 0.5 point on the budget. And that's really for deferrals of aging equipment. And we did include a chart of our peers. What we spend, we do spend less than our peers on infrastructure for technology. The one highlight is New Canaan does fund theirs at capital. We'll talk about that a little bit. Home to school transportation next year will be year 3 of a 5-year contract, and that'll result in another almost 1/4 point increase on the budget. So just looking at those items in isolation, you're already at a 4.6% increase. It doesn't consider anything to do with special education. And then we obviously have some small contractual increases like the Fitch property, the garbage contract, utilities, and any unfunded mandates that might exist. While there aren't just increases, we do have some savings. So deductible changes to insurance plans will had some savings. Additional state aid for excess costs. We've kind of seen that fluctuate over time, though even with the additional $40 million, if claims do go up, that reimbursement will go down. Some of the legislation that's been passed that we talked about earlier this year, like the the state schedule for pricing, that's going to drive special ed costs up, not down. And so when we look at that, more money in excess cost might not necessarily mean a higher reimbursement, because if prices go up because there are now caps on what out-of-district placements can charge, that creates shortages in facilities. Shortages in facilities mean they have to go elsewhere, whether it's a non-state approved agency or places that can raise costs. So those are things that could potentially work against us. We've highlighted salary schedule changes that we've negotiated with our unions, whether the custodians, the paras, the secretaries. Cumulative, those salary schedules have saved over $1 million for the district, just about $1.1 million. And so we are seeing more individuals go towards those programs if people leave the district. And, you know, in the past, we've talked about programs. And so those are things that'll have to be considered, whether it's the transition program, there was talk of a communications coordinator, or continuing the reading program in grades 3 through 5. Those would all add to the budget as well above that 4.6. On the capital side, we are just starting the study of Middlesex that was approved for the fiscal 26 budget. Depending on the outcome of that study, that's likely to make a recommendation in excess of $50 million to deal with that facility. And then the high school is starting to age. And as we've shown in the capital budget, you know, in the next 5 years, you are looking at things like new roofs, new turf, new HVAC. All those things at a minimum will probably cost about $15 million over the next 5 years. And so you have at least, you know, $65+ million in capital needs just in those two buildings. We've talked a little bit about some items that could be considered long-term. I know in the past, whether it's the transition program or other things, in-district special education, out-of-district tuition remains a volatile area. It's been about $1 million increase each year for the last 2 years. So whether or not we should have programs in-house, it is important to know that not all in-district programs are going to save money. If we look at what the average tuition is, it's about $90,000. The average cost of a para is $85,000. So depending on if a program is a paraprofessional, that might not actually save any money. You also have space constraints. You might not have the space within your existing 7 buildings to house programs like that, which means then you might have to find alternative space similar like Fitch. So anytime you have to get an alternative site, that means more cost is added as well. And then transportation challenges. More students that we bring in district, not all students out of district receive transportation. If you bring them in district, our existing fleet might not be able to support them. And we do have a limit on how many vehicles we can have based on the special permit. We did highlight that technologies. So some districts like New Canaan do budget technology equipment in capital. There are pros and cons to this. Financially, it would help offset your budget in the first year. The downside is you do lose control over those items, and some of that does impact the education. So for example, if you were to have all your technology in capital, for whatever reason, the town decides to cut Chromebooks in grade 5, that means immediately your one-to-one program at the elementary school goes away. So one of two things either has to happen. You have to adapt in a short time to decide how you're going to operate without one-to-one at the elementary schools, or then you're going to have to essentially cut something out of your operating budget to fund those items that got cut. So you lose that flexibility when you move items in capital. The town also has a threshold set of $5,000 for an item, and so not all technology items meet that threshold. We've talked about in the past the non-lapsing account. Some districts do utilize a non-lapsing account, which are savings accrued from a prior year. They are typically better used when you have one-time expenses like technology or facility repairs, textbooks, things like that. They work best in communities and towns where there's full buy-in. So not just full buy-in from a Board of Ed, from the Board of Finance, the RTM, so that it doesn't become looked at as a pot of money that could be taken from either entity. You really have to have buy-in if it's going to work. We've also talked about a bus depot. A bus depot is not something you're going to be able to implement on the short term, as we discussed in May. It's likely something that would have to be implemented off cycle. It's not as if you created a bus depot tomorrow for students going to move all their buses there and give you a big credit. That's not going to happen. And you would not be able to get another company to start the school year on short notice. So that, is kind of where we stand currently. It is still early, being July, and we do typically start the budget process in October.
Rich, I believe this came up at the last meeting. But the change with busing in Greenwich, what are the if any, for us, not necessarily short term, because I don't believe there are, but long term, does that change the landscape in the area with regard to busing?
Sure, so it doesn't have an impact on us. First student prior to the change in Greenwich had, I believe, 3 lots in Stanford that they utilized. For us, for Stanford, a little bit for Greenwich. Greenwich made the choice to move away from first student because of cost implications, so they moved to DATCO. You know, for us, long-term, if we were to see, let's say, Stanford also leave, whether or not first student would want to remain here,
Just for us. Yeah.
could be concerning, because we would be essentially their only game in town to have a depot there. And our depot is partially shared with buses from Stanford. So if Stanford said, okay, we're going to go away from first student, we're going to go to DATCO 2, that could put pressure on us. And obviously we would have a big concern because there are not a lot of opportunities for other bus companies here. But there's no short-term issues right now.
We know where Stanford is their cycle.
I would have to check.
So if we, based on where our contract is, and we were to start to do a study, what's the timing if it worked out well that we would acquire a piece of property? Like, are we talking 2 years from now or?
So we would put out, so you're going into the fiscal 27 budget would be year 3 of 5.
Okay.
So typically you would put a bid out in the fall of the year before it expires. So that would be fiscal 29. So that fall right before that budget. And you would want to include in that bid the fact that you had a depot. So if you were to get it,
Sorry, fall of 28.
so the fall of 28, so that you would implement in 29, I believe it is. Because you'd want to be able to put in the bid that we have a depot, which means you're going to have to carry that depot without any buses actually on it for a period of time. So if, let's say you had a depot in the fall of 28, you're not using it at that point, and you're getting ready to use it for summer of 29.
Okay,
So you're going to have a period of no use essentially for that depot. And then to be able to advertise the fact that we now do have a depot and we'd want to have it effectively utilized July 1st.
right. And then the question is, Chair, where do we stand in discussions in terms of capital prioritization as a town? And how do we get this, them to start looking at that? Like, because it seems like a no-brainer strategically that this should be significantly considered as a capital priority for the town. So like, how do we see this
So
through now?
we're all aware of it. I think actually having a timeline is actually a great step so that we understand what time and event it would be, so that the town can actually model it appropriately. Thank you, Jeff. So sorry, what I was saying is, the selectmen and the P and Z are aware, this is the Board of Finance, that we need a bus depot. We think it's advantageous to have one. The next step, I think, would be to communicate this new timeline so that they could model it in their own capital planning and see how it stacks up, and understand a little better, you know, the notion that we have to carry it, et cetera.
And what about a cost benefit analysis? Like, what can the timing be there to, or own versus lease, if you will, or?
So, I mean, I did provide Dr. Adley previous, I think it was in June, a comparison of what other districts have in terms of whether they have a depot, they don't have a depot, what are they paying? You know, it is in that $400,000 to $500,000, you know, annualized savings, based on the difference of the daily rate that those communities pay versus us.
You said it. Yeah, go ahead.
So the difference between the communities that have a bus depot versus that don't, so us, for example, the difference in the daily rate for them is about $400,000 to $500,000 in aggregate in total across what we would have as 25 buses. So the issue is going to be whether or not if we were to get one and we were to put out a bid, how many competitive bids do we get? One of the things that we're seeing, so First Student, for example, they were bought by a private equity. And since that happened, a lot of the prices have risen dramatically. You know, that's one of the reasons Greenwich chose to make a switch to DATCO. Will we get a DATCO who's interested, who in the past has said we won't bid because we don't have anywhere to park your buses? Would we get an STA to bid who's in Wilton, for example? And so the more competition we can have, obviously, the better that will be in terms of leverage and even once getting those bid, negotiating with those various vendors. And essentially pitting the three of them against each other to see where we come in.
I think in fact, you were gonna put that together so we could
So I
send it.
did
Yeah.
provide that
Okay.
to Dr. Adley. I don't know
Okay,
where it went.
great. So maybe you could take a look at it and then we can put it in a package with the timeline, a recommended timeline and send it over there to the selectmen and the P and Z.
Going back to the DATCO, you said that first, the Greenwich and Stanford and Darien all had the same lot. So does DATCO have a separate lot now for Greenwich?
So they don't have the same lot. They have different lots in Stanford that they rented for a student. So they have a lot that provides just for Stanford. They have a lot that provides for us and a portion of Stanford, and they had another lot that supported a portion of Greenwich. That lot was terminated, the lease with that lot for student was terminated. And so Greenwich does have other spots where they park, but they have a lot of buses when we compare to us, not just because they're bigger, but they also have a lot of private schools. And in Connecticut, you are responsible for busing private school students as a Board of Education. And so they are using a different facility.
Oh,
Dave.
sorry. Rich, can you just remind me where New Canaan parks all their buses?
They park them at the high school.
All of them?
They do park them all at the high school and then at the elementary, so they're all propane. And then at the elementary school, they have a propane filling station.
Got it. Thanks, Rich.
Joanna?
This is about the bus depot, is that
Fine.
okay? Whenever we do talk about finances and planning for the future, I feel like we often get stuck with the idea that, or just even taking it back to what we were talking about before lunch. I don't feel like there's a lot of trust between boards. Maybe we talk to each other and we're, and then on the basic level, like, we're not lying to each other. But I feel like we are sometimes don't have the ability to be like, we need to do X and we're gonna put money in a non-lancing account for that, or however we decide to do that, and then we all move on. I feel like there's this sense of distrust or punishment, or if we do one thing that they haven't, that we think is best for the town, we get second guessed by them. And also the RTM, not just the Board of Finance. So I'm just wondering, how do we solve that problem so that we can plan without constantly worrying what the other governing bodies are going to do?
I have some thoughts, but I think this is a good board discussion. I think one of the things is the stronger we are early before the budget, so we don't all open our budget and say, oh, surprise. I think that's one piece. I think we've also been working on explicitly communicating better so that things like talking about the bus depot, talking about sidewalks, continuing those kinds of communications across boards. I think also figuring out on the bus depot is a very good example of us not presenting a finished product, but inviting them into the decision-making so that they can see what the cost benefit analysis is and there can be some mutual problem solving. So there's a feeling of ownership. I think that's another way. That doesn't work in every case because we don't really want co-problem solving on everything we do. And I think also, I think this year's budget was a lot better than the one before. We were all in 9 different directions, and this year we did make some choices and some trade-offs, but making sure that we're tighter on our own decision-making so that it stands up to scrutiny. But I think I'd go back to the conversation earlier about trust, and that just takes time to build. But I welcome some other thoughts on that. I don't think it's all one way. I've given some examples of things that we could do on our end, but I think there has to be a mutual commitment to building trust.
Yeah, I mean, that last point you just hit, they have to communicate backwards too, in terms of what they see as the fiscal status of the town and give some guidance, guidelines, whatever you want to call it. It's really tough to go in with a black box and not really understanding that other 1/3 of the town budget, what constraints that the whole town budget, because again, we don't get into the financing costs. I mean, actually it's carried on the town side. So I think communication and some feedback and back and forth. And, since my tenure, we've moved up this discussion to this day now. And I think it's been truly helpful to communicate the landscape that we're facing we still have differences of opinion, how we should present that to the community and the other boards, but I think that will continue to get reconciled. So those are my.
Dave?
So I would just say, speaking to the tension, stepping back not as a board member, but as a resident in town, I see that as a feature, not a bug. We want to have people scrutinizing what we're doing. We want to have people challenging us, making sure we're presenting good ideas and good analytics and how we got to our decision. And so with Board of Finance, with their, remit to really just look at the numbers, I would expect them to challenge us. I would expect RTM to do the same. So to me, that's actually, I think, a good point. But I think we can have comedy and we could have good working relationships with them. And I think the trust issue we've been kicking around a little bit today kind of works in two ways. One is we're dealing in a relationship. We're going to build trust over time and earn that. The other is if you're in a transaction, you basically have to decide you're taking a leap of faith and trusting, or you're not taking that leap of faith and trusting. And so I think as we start to transition here from taking a leap of faith and trusting what we're going to do moving forward, and then demonstrate over time that competency, then I think the comedy between the boards will be there. And I hope they still challenge us and make sure we're doing good thinking and working hard to come to our results. But I don't see that as a problem. I see that as a challenge that benefits everybody.
I don't disagree with you. I hope that the other bodies can get to that why that we are all are hoping for, right? And taking that fire hose out of their hands and getting to that higher level. If this is why the school district needs X, Y, Z, not, the $42.72 cost. So if we can raise that conversation up ourselves, hopefully they will in turn raise their conversation up to them.
I think another thing that it's worth us being aware of is how much of the budget we actually are. I'm not sure that, I think around this table, we know that, but I'm not sure that everybody knows. We are the biggest driver of the town budget by, a large margin. We're up to 3/4 of it if you count debt. So understanding that, and there is no line item veto on our budget. So because there's no line item veto, it creates a little bit of a different relationship than what the Board of Selectmen has, because there is line item veto on their budget. So I think that does create some tension that we have to navigate, scrutiny. And sometimes that scrutiny includes tension, and there, I do agree that there is some natural tension that's natural and appropriate. But as long as our work stands the test of time, and again, I think one thing we can all do on all sides of this table is continue to think a lot about buy-in from our fellow government parties, from the community, understanding that we need time to roll things out and kick the tires. It's hard to do publicly. I mean, to your point, Greg, that everything we do is public, and then, it's hard to kick the tires in that way. So we have to balance it a little bit, but it's a good question.
I think on some of the longer term things, such as a bus depot, if we are able to come up with a good cost analysis, a cost benefit analysis that shows realistically the savings over time, I do have a sense that the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen would buy into that, and the RTM would buy into that, because in the past, when we were able to show the effectiveness of some of the programs, for instance, the outsourcing or insourcing of some of the special education transportation. I mean, when we put together the analysis and do that work, I do think that they will work with us and partner with us, because they understand the longer term benefits, even though it might be a cost outlay in the short term. I just feel like we have to have that trust.
Dave?
I was just one minor follow-up, which is pretty obvious, but I would expect from finance, if we, spend $500,000 today to save $500,000 in 5 years, obviously right now in today's money means different things. I would expect we're probably gonna have to go to that sort of level of diligence and provide that.
Yes. I think diligence, when there's two things. There's, I think, actually being a little better at the strategic thinking and spending a lot less time on, I'll call it the $50, and doing a lot better job with the strategic piece will build trust. And then the other side, though, is that when we do have a proposal that needs to get through the other boards, another good example, the bus depot plus, I think our middle school will be another good example, making sure that we've really kicked all the tires on that ourselves before it gets out of our hands. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up. Just in terms of the communication with the Board of Finance, I know we normally don't do it till later,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they dislike surprises as much as we do.
Yeah.
I don't know, when we're thinking through this, whatever this process should look like going forwards, however we can get them involved earlier may be beneficial so that they're not surprised. And that way, when they go into their board of finance meeting, everybody kind of already knows what the answer is.
And when you say get them involved, can you be a little more specific about what you mean?
Well, like, we're already getting some somewhat indirect
Yeah.
of here's some big drivers of what's gonna happen this year.
Right.
So
Right.
we're starting to get eyes wide open of like, wow, this could be a big number.
Right.
How can we move things around to try to shape that? But I don't know if they're watching the meeting and taking notes or not.
They'll know
They
about
are,
it.
Should be.
I'm sure they
they'll know
are.
about it.
So-
Yeah, they're usually
But,
informed,
you know,
but
having maybe more informal conversations earlier might help with the process.
yeah. I think they were pretty, it's like some of them were pretty well informed, going in. But I
Or
think.
maybe it's just soliciting direct feedback without it being public feedback.
Without it being public, yeah. Okay. Dennis,
Going back to the bus depot, I'm thinking of it as more of a risk avoidance, if that's the right term of that. You know, how do we, now that Greenwich is no longer in the equation, New Canaan does their own busing. We have Norwalk as our only partner maybe left and Stanford. If Stanford goes somewhere else, we're left literally on an island. And, you know, we have to have that risk avoidance of not, of being able to bus the children to school.
do you have that in the memo already, that set of factors?
So when I gave the memo was prior to the full Greenwich.
Okay.
April Crescent certainly had something. to do with
Yeah.
that. The biggest obstacle for the community in terms of getting a bus depot is a residential community. Buses are very loud at an hour a day that people don't want them to be very loud.
Yeah,
And so even like Norwalk, I know Norwalk has a depot, but they don't have space to let additional buses on their depot. And
mhm,
if it got to the point where Stanford left first student gave us their 90-day out, we had no buses, and you're gonna effectively have to pay probably 5 to 10 times more to have people bus in from other lots on a daily basis. It's gonna take what,
Yeah,
mhm.
that's my point though, is that we have to avoid that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we might be able to rent something in a neighboring community, right?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest one is Stanford because they do have like an industrial zone, which is why some of the depots are there. The lot in Norwalk is a little bit different. They actually didn't have a depot for the longest time and then they ended up getting one. But it's kind of abundance of space on that lot. As you can imagine, Norwalk being a big district has a lot of buses.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for adding that. That's great. Additional color. Thank you, Dennis, for the point.
And going back, sorry. The technology, we're so low. Is that because we went to bring your own device or is that something?
No, a lot of it has to do with deferrals that have been made in previous budget cycles. We do tend to lengthen out the time in which we hold devices. I mean, we have devices in the district that are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. That they're not operating great, but when you have tight budget cycles, that does tend to be a place where you try to get some reductions. A district like Darien should probably be in that, 0.6 to 0.7% of your budget on equipment and infrastructure. It's not uncommon for people to complain in the district about, a device running slowly, and that is in large part just because of the age of the devices.
What does that 0.22 represent? Is that a 1 year? Is that an average? over
That's the
some-
current year.
That's the current year.
year.
What is our normal rate?
It's usually closer to that 0.4. You're really closer to where like Wilton is. You have not really been at that 0.7% where Ridgefield and New Canaan have been. New Canaan, I mean, they do put theirs in capital and they're pretty consistent around $800,000 a year. Again, if you put technology equipment in capital, you give line item veto to the other boards in town. And so you have to understand that risk that's there.
What's the benefit?
So the benefit, it doesn't create that fluctuation that we have. So if we were to look into next year and you were to just approve what's in the standard replacement cycle, I mean, you have a 0.5 point on your budget before anything's even done, right? And so you have those ups and downs and you have those peaks, and it's not uncommon in the past where, technology has seen either a 1/4 point or a 0.5 point on the budget's total increase. Whereas if you put it in capital, you kind of have that same, let's call it $800,000 every year. You're buying Chromebooks and you're buying ViewSonics or laptops or whatever those devices might be. you get a little bit more consistency and you avoid those peaks and valleys. But in a year maybe where budget's tight and the town is looking to reduce expenses for whatever reason it might be, similar to a couple of years ago when the paving at Tokenique got cut, there is nothing preventing them from saying, we're cutting the grade 5 Chromebooks. And at that point, if that was the example, 1-to-1 at the elementary schools is gone. And so the Board of Ed would have to decide, do we want to operate without 1-to-1 at the elementary schools? Or do we want to then between May and June, try to figure out how to reconcile out whatever we need to get those?
In your operating budget.
Correct.
Dave?
So I guess, just thinking through the technology, Eric, what are we going to hear on sort of your philosophy on technology or where we should be thinking about that or what the direction is, maybe to strategically inform how we should be figuring what this number ought to look like?
I'll need a lot more information before I could weigh.
Oh,
in
it's
on
early.
that,
I'm
but
sorry to-
Yeah, no, I think
ambush
that's, it's an important conversation to have. I mean, we have to look at it in terms of what is technology for operations sake and what is it for instructional purposes. And I think that's an important conversation for us to have and to bring back.
Thank you.
I think it would be helpful to see that, maybe not exactly at the same time, maybe there, but in tandem, understand maybe a couple years of forecasts, because I think it's helpful to understand the impacts on the bottom line. And if it's, consistently, it should be around, 0.6 to 0.7. Then we talk about that as a consistent number. But if the way we've structured it, we're going to have some fluctuations, this might be an example of where we want to have a conversation with our partners about the best way to fund it. So maybe, John, that's something you guys can look at in finance.
Got 2 more meetings. So.
Well, then you got two more to figure out when to look at it.
Rich, just a silly question on my end maybe, but the threshold of $5,000 you say is a capital item, is that like a Chromebook is one item or the lot of Chromebooks is one item?
So it's the item.
So one Chromebook?
So-
So you can't do 5, so 5th grade Chromebooks,
So the
is that an
the-
example or
The
not?
town could choose to make that change, right? So there's no like law that says it has to be like an individual item or it has to be the pool, but the town's kind of like process for what they consider capital is $5,000 for the item and a useful life. I think it's about 4 years. So they could choose to make that change, and other communities have made that change as well. Like Norwalk, for example, made the decision that when they buy textbooks, as an example, because they are such a large district, when they buy a new reading program, it's in the millions of dollars. And so they choose to put that as a capital expense and they take it out of non-recurring capital. The town here could choose to do that, but based on what their guidance is for capital now, the Chromebook wouldn't.
Okay, thank you. Robin?
Since New Canaan has technology in their capital, do you know what their threshold is?
I would have to ask.
Okay.
Anyone else on this memo? No? All right. Thank you all for the information. That was extremely helpful to see. All right, with that, we'll move on to the discussion on the Board of Education goals for 25-26.
So I primed this conversation earlier in the discussion around the text and thinking about the kinds of goals that I would recommend that the board be considering. So what's in your packet and what I think is being displayed up here. So currently there are, when I picked apart and spent some time with Amy looking at the goals for the district and the board together, there were 3 goals that seemed to me to be absolutely right in the wheelhouse of the board governance. Goals 3, 4, and 5 are existing goals from the strategic plan that I would recommend consideration as standalone Board of Education goals. In addition, there were 2 other goals that I also think are correctly in the location and the responsibility of the Board of Education. The first being the successful implementation of a superintendent search and finding a new superintendent. And the second being successful and timely contract negotiations. With that being said, I certainly just want to open it up for a discussion. To me, as I was looking through the strategic plan, thinking about what should be in the helicopter and who should be holding the hose, these are helicopter items, and I think they're most appropriate to be the goals for the board. And I do think the board should have standalone goals as opposed to the district goals, which should be the fire hose goals that are in the strategic plan. So open to discussion. Obviously, these are drafts. These are things I pulled and then put some things together and would welcome any additional discussion, thoughts, wordsmithing.
Okay. Any thoughts? Are we all generally in agreement with this direction as this defines how we're describing our work for the next year?
To me, this makes a lot of sense. It's very clear. It's very easy to digest for those people that are wondering, what does the board do versus what does the district do? It seems to make a lot of sense. I have questions about the specifics, but if people want to talk about the overall.
Okay, let's stay with the, so generally, yes, Katie and then Robin.
Thank you for putting this together, and I appreciate the redirection because I've always found the status quo a bit confusing. I do like looking at this, as a one pager and sort of thinking about the next year. And what does, almost as like a summary of like, what as a Board of Ed member are your priorities? What are you going to spend the next year doing? And, only a portion of us are on the negotiating team. So that goal is off for, more than half of the board. So that leaves the other two. And looking at the superintendent search, we have two people who are chairing the organization and communication of that. So that lands on their plate a bit more. And we've outsourced that. So then that leaves us with the budget season. And I actually worry sometimes that the concepts of the Board of Ed gets boiled down to just the budget, as opposed to one component of it. So I guess my question is, where does some of the more day-to-day stuff, and day-to-day is not the right word because that implies operations and that's not our, but where do we find the rest of our responsibilities and kind of that stewardship and oversight for kids?
Well, you could identify them as call out goals for those things, but those are the normal, regular expectations of the board's function. So policy, we wouldn't create a goal around policy because that's your statutory responsibility is policy. I mean, those kinds of things, there is a tremendous amount of work of the board. But when I think of goals, those are specific call out things that are most important for this 1 year. And unless I'm misunderstanding, there are chairs for the search committee, but ultimately doesn't the entire board, when you get to the process of the hiring, that would be the entire board. And frankly, in the world of boards of education, the most important thing you will do in your service as a board is hire a superintendent. So I would say that it is a pretty significant piece because even behind the scenes, there's a big piece that you've outsourced, which is the gathering of information. To me, board members working to get people to show up at those forums, to complete the surveys, I think those are critically important pieces for board members to take on, whether or not they're chairs of the search committee. But, I think there's a lot that is in the responsibility of the board that wouldn't be specific called out goals. And these would be annual. Obviously, you accomplish goal 1, that's going to be replaced. It could be around the superintendent's entry. It could be around meeting structure. It could be around a lot of things. And some of these are huge. When you think about goal number 5, that's a huge goal. You think about goal number 4, you're going to roll into a goal around the middle school pretty shortly after this, or that's going to expand beyond the middle school study to middle school action. So hopefully that answers the question, but
Greg. I'm sorry.
I like the list. Thanks for putting it together. My question was like, this is definitely a great list for us as a board. Is there like a different list that we get to see that's more like district goals. So I just.
Oh, yeah,
I
the
think about
district,
like.
so
think
we'll
about
get
like
to that.
The implementation of interreading.
Yep,
Like, that's not on this list, but that's not for the board.
that's not for the board, that's for us, and
Yeah.
your oversight over that is inherent in your responsibility. So
Right, right.
the district goals will still be the weedy goals, but this just clarifies what's in your wheelhouse and what's in ours.
Great. Yeah, that's.
Robin?
Greg, my question was similar to Greg's, just that because when we do our self-evaluation, the first question is, do you feel as a board that you have, helped to improve student growth and achievement, or, whatever it was, which is really has to do more with the strategic goal number 1 in our strategic plan. So I just want to verify, and I agree with these goals, which are in a way more operational in nature for the Board of Ed, just in terms of what we really need to get done. But just to confirm, we still would be working hand in hand to ensure that those district goals and strategic plan are
Correct,
ongoing.
that's your
Yeah.
responsibility is the
Right.
oversight of that. So it's our job to deliver, it's your job to make sure that we're delivering.
That was really my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John?
So just to be clear, negotiations, we just execute, but we get guidance from the entire board and we seek that guidance. So we'll be coming back, numerous times and getting feedback. And if we're going off on a little bit of the wrong direction, that the consensus of the board, you bring us back and direct us elsewhere. So that's a pretty important responsibility for all of us. The other question is, should we put a bus depot on this as a distinct,
We could broaden goal forward.
yeah, I would suggest we do that. Get it out there.
Particularly because it looks like in the, long-term financial planning, you also have high school. So while over a year basis, the only thing we'll be doing from a vote perspective is likely to be middle school.
Right,
We should be communicating about the others.
and then that would be modified, if a high school study is added in fiscal 27, that would certainly be something, because in the world I live, many goals keep rolling and they just get modified and transitioned. Obviously, goal 1 is not one that you would roll, but pretty much all the others.
Hopefully.
1 and 2, yeah.
We're gonna be optimistic.
I feel like you could lock that into goal 4.
Yeah,
Have
yeah,
it
yeah,
be
absolutely.
Key capital projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Key capital projects.
Thank you.
Anything else? Sarah, did you have some specific?
I'm gonna hold my question because I had a fire hose in my hand.
Mhm.
You get a gold star.
Okay, so we won't be voting on these tonight, but we would be. So if you have interim thoughts, please send them in.
If we could, in the next meeting with the officers, we could finalize any language and bring another draft, because there are certain things, I've heard the communication plan is finalized, and I've heard we're not sure it's completely finalized. So I had it in here, and those kinds of things we want to clarify before going forward, so.
Okay. Discussion on.
Sorry,
board-
I just want to clarify that, somehow my Outlook changed its formatting and I didn't see the updated material, so I was not aware of 4 and 5. So thank you, Eric, for completing the board's work with those.
Discussion on Board of Education strategic plan for 25-26.
So Amy, I'm going to let you run with this one. Amy has been trying to orient me on how this has been processed and discussed in the past. And so she's agreed to take the lead here, which I greatly appreciate.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. Look how fast you are. Thank you so much. What you have on the screen now, everyone, is the strategic plan from the June 10th meeting that was updated. And what I had explained to Dr. Byrne is during the board retreat in July, year over year, we've typically removed any of the items that were complete, or we've taken off the prior year. So this time last year, we had year 3 and 4 during the retreat. We settled on year 4 and then finalized, I believe, in the fall meeting. So, right now, as a cabinet, we'll continue to orient Dr. Byrne, and we will, put our focus on the items that were in year 5. However, I would like to provide just a high-level overview on some things that I think, especially from a teaching and learning perspective, where we need to maybe shift some of our focus. So in the June 10th version that everyone has seen from the spring update for enhancing teaching and learning, March and I have been working on that continued implementation of the revised educator and evaluator support plan. So that will shift in the strategic plan. And again, these are the fire hose details. We are going to not use TEPL anymore as our software program. So we're going to be orienting the staff so that we've been able to find efficiencies. We'll be using the Google Suite. We also, though, need to do some continued work with our administrative leadership team on providing high quality feedback and sharpening the focus on what does high quality instructional practice look like. As we make a shift to our K-3 literacy new resource, that will be incredibly important because, again, program agnostic, we really want to be focusing on high quality instructional practices and outcomes. As you know, in the strategic plan in the past, we had actions around play-based learning. Happy to report, as we talked about in June, we have already developed some curriculum in that area. There are now updates around implementing that curriculum, and really during the break before, there were some first grade staff up there working in curriculum writing, and one of the things we talked about was strengthening the articulation between K and 1, so that the kindergarten teachers really know where kids are going in grade 1, and the first grade teachers really know what kids have experienced. So that work needs to shift and continue in its evolution. Thinking about PLCs, there is continued work in the district that needs to take place around strengthening district protocols for PLCs. And while we're having some additional time this year for the K-3 literacy work, we've talked about, obviously, we'll need to have an intentional plan for grades 4 and 5. And there's also time for us to take a look at how those PLCs are functioning at the middle school and high school. So that's an example of some shift and continued evolution of the work that will take place in Goal 1. In addition to the K-3 literacy piece, we're no longer piloting. We're actually going to go into year 1 implementation. And that will require us to think about, well, what's going to happen with grades 4 and 5? How do we scope that out? What does that mean for our current 4th and 5th graders, like in this next year ahead? And then what does that mean for our continued work? We think about building a very strong literacy program, preschool through grade 12 plus. So those are kind of the big highlights. There are some other pieces that I would like us to consider, I think, from a teaching and learning perspective. Science, somebody pointed out before, maybe it was you, Joanna, literacy is incredibly important. We have these other areas too. Maybe it was in the early portion of the interview. How do we not let those things fall off the plate? There's some work that we need to do in the area of science. I'd like us to think about our assessments and how we look at how we're assessing students and embedding those into the curriculum. So these are some areas where, again, enhancing teaching and learning, fire hose kind of details, but important for the board to understand. We think about that deep learning, the chapter that we just read. We have invested a lot of money as a board and as a community in the Global Learning Commons with the HHR projects. And so when you have those types of new spaces, you need to be thinking about what are the curriculum shifts that need to happen and what are the instructional shifts? What should instruction look like in those spaces? So I think the board should expect that you'll see some of those pieces in enhancing teaching and learning Goal 1 when we come back. I know that the board had also asked about like handwriting and typing. So these are pieces, again, that are kind of expanded literacy considerations that should be, again, in the evolution of the next part of as we revise Goal 1. And AI literacy. So that's going to be incredibly important. It's something that we'll see across content areas. So those are just some examples of things that as a cabinet we need to discuss. We need to discuss with the rest of our staff. We'll have an administrative retreat August 14th. And things that we'll be looking forward to coming back to the board with to get the board's reaction and feedback. With regard to curricula, with the literacy pilot in K-3, this year will be a heavy year in focusing I wouldn't say just implementing with fidelity, but implementing with integrity, really focusing our conversation on instruction. I would anticipate that throughout this year, we'll be taking note on any shifts that we need to make from a curriculum perspective in the year ahead. Shirley and I are working really closely together to provide Orton Gillingham training. So that will be a goal that kind of, it's throughout Goal 1 when we think about really the instruction piece and the curriculum piece, what we're building as far as an Orton Gillingham type academy for our staff in general education and special education staff. So again, I'm hoping that the board sees that this is work that's continued from previous iteration of the strategic plan. On the MTSS framework, a quick update on that, we have developed a handbook that will guide the staff in implementing a more robust MTSS implementation across the district, especially right now, we're gonna focus on elementary and middle school, grades K through 8. So that will be something that, we'll be going from revising and expanding the K-8 SRBI protocols to an MTSS framework and really thinking about how do we introduce the handbook and what that is and provide professional learning for staff? How do we make sure that we're matching assessment and assessment practices to that framework so that we are really utilizing data and sharing data points with the board and stakeholders to make good, strong, effective instructional decisions and curricular decisions. So those are some of the kind of big shifts in goal 1. And then I would say, we'll have a continued effort with the instructional rounds, let's job embedded professional learning opportunities. But something else I'd like us to consider and we'll continue to talk about is how do we ensure that our teachers are having time in one another's classrooms? So thinking about lab classrooms and such, so that especially as we're implementing a new program, staff can see firsthand peers engaging in high quality instructional practices. And because we had our staff involved in that pilot work last year, we have some staff that do have a year of experience with this new resource. So we really want to be able to capitalize on that. So I can take any questions about goal 1, but my intent here was to kind of show you how some of the shifts of the work will take place. Some of the work will kind of fall off, like we're no longer embedded, we're no longer implementing a new teacher evaluation program. It's not new. So what we really need to do now is sharpen the focus on how are we identifying high quality instructional practices and how are we improving the quality of feedback that administrators are giving staff so that there's change in instructional practice. So this is my goal to kind of show you what's falling off and the evolution of the work as we continue. I'm happy to take any questions on goal 1 and where I can continue. The other goals are probably a faster uptake. So, I could talk about T-bone forever.
Any questions on goal 1? Greg?
Just one quick one. You listed a few new areas. I think you said handwriting, AI. Is there like a broader list that you're considering? Like, I know within handwriting, cursive and is like something that people have thought about reincorporating into elementary school. Is there like a list of things that you're thinking about including? And then are there also conversely to that areas that you might consider removing from curriculum potentially in the future where you're saying, hey, this is either outdated or not of interest for our students, like seeing what that broader list looks like and like why you say one should be added versus like all those changes would be helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. And you'll hear that, some things are fads, like do you give spelling tests like you used to back in the day, probably when we were all in school, right? What's the place of handwriting and cursive? Is there any value in that? Kids have to actually learn to sign a document. You hear people talk about all of these things. I think something that will be critically important is when we're thinking about discussing literacy, really thinking broadly, what do we mean by that? And even beyond that, part of literacy is speaking. How are we adjusting those standards with kids? So you can anticipate that the curriculum committee on those things will continue to be discussed. Another piece that I didn't mention before, but is certainly on my notes here. As you know, we've talked about executive functioning, right? And primarily thinking about ELP. How does that happen in our early learning program in kindergarten? And the board has requested that we come forward sharing more information about executive functioning and how that's integrated throughout the school day at the different levels. So I always have a running list, and the priorities on that list shift, that they shift according to, the priority of the work within a strategic plan, but also responsibly what we see the needs are in our schools with input from our staff.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Katie?
Thank you, Amy. I really like the way you went over this. I feel like you touched on so many things that are on my mind in like a very quick overview. And I can tell from looking at the screen that you have all the detail to back it up, which doesn't surprise me. So thank you for that. To Greg's point, I do wonder, and I'm thinking out loud here, like on the spot. So please feel free to tell me if this is not helpful to you. But specifically in terms of curriculum, I think that there are so many aspects that we have interest in and we want to talk about. And maybe in an effort to know that we're coming back to those conversations and know where, I wonder if it would be beneficial to kind of have that like list of topics that we hope to get for the year where the curriculum subcommittee could kind of see, and maybe it is fluctuating where they go on priorities. And I don't know if that makes you nervous and you prefer to have your own list and not share it with us, but I do kind of wonder if we can see, as a board that we are going to talk about type E or, whatever, at some point, if that doesn't help us avoid coming back to it at all the wrong moments. So just a thought about that particular subcommittee.
I can appreciate that. It definitely does not make me nervous. All of my lists are very public. And what I would say to you is something that I noticed my first year in this work here in Darien was it seemed to me that the curriculum items and the board agenda items with regard to teaching and learning were kind of carryover or holdover year to year. It was like, well, and I'm making this up right now, September's mathematics and October is science. And they were kind of broad topics that were just kind of scheduled over the course of the year. What I've tried to do, and certainly K-3 literacy was a huge part of the work of the board and administration the past year. I've tried to bring things up in order to kind of prepare for the budget and to forecast some of the priority work on the instructional side, the instructional part of the division. So that doesn't make me nervous at all. I do have a list. I'm happy to talk with Dr. Byrne on how we might communicate that with the board. I tend to think through, more than just the month and the weeks ahead. So I think it makes sense for us to kind of work on that together. And I think Dr. Byrne and I have already talked a little bit about that, where I think he and I are both accustomed to kind of having a plan that falls in line with the academic year calendar and the fiscal calendar, capital improvement plan calendar, because all of these pieces connect. Just like we were reading about here, right? Thinking systemically, we want to think about how those other parts of our work connect with what we're executing for teaching and learning. So in short, it does not make me nervous at all. It's something that I will talk with Dr. Byrne about. Okay.
Goal 2, please.
Okay, goal 2, fostering a culture that promotes wellness, diversity, and inclusion. As you know, we took the elements that were involved in the DEI report, which largely, I think the greatest focus there had to do with different groups that were performing, different subgroups performing at different levels. There's a lot of work in that plan that had to do with MTSS and literacy. So I think some of the work that we're engaging in, again, with having Lauren Gillingham type academy and thinking about our work together in general ed and special education side is going to be really important. Something that there's not been a lot of conversation about here, but is something that is legislated and important for us to think about is the work on restorative practices. I think we have a lot of work to do, not only with our staff, but also with the parent community about that. That's something that I know through Dr. Dad, parents had asked about last year, helping parents to understand and families to understand what is restorative practices, what does that mean in a classroom setting with our youngest students at the elementary level all the way up through the high school. So that's something that I think will evolve a little bit. As you know, we spent a lot of time discussing the tech, the cell phone personal device guidelines across the school district. And so though this goal will have to evolve a little bit as we implement year 1 in grades 9 through 11, really, because our 12th graders have a different plan. This work should also evolve a bit because back 2 years ago, I guess, Darien Public Schools was not administering an annual climate survey. And we know that that's legislated. We know it is something that we're doing now where we're surveying annually staff, students, and our children and about their school experiences. And so something that we need to do is make sure that there's really clear communication about what that survey data is and how that's impacting the work of developing a climate plan within the school. And how do we communicate that not only internally to our children and our staff, but to our families? That should really be a source of how we promote family partnership across, not just the academic domains, but in all parts of our work in a school setting. So I would expect that that's how that goal will evolve a little bit. And I will also say that I will continue to come forward and seek support for professional learning for universal design for learning. And that's where, from a curriculum perspective, this goal really does touch on making sure that we're providing access for all learners and learners of all profiles. And admittedly, that's an area of work for me. And I have a lot of learning to do there. And I know that my colleagues feel the same way. Shirley and I will both look to each other to be experts there. And I think we realize neither one of us is, just like many other people in our field. So that's an area of learning for us and our colleagues. And something that I would expect should stay on this plan and be a part of our future curriculum and budget conversations. And I think those are the highlights of goal 2.
Any questions about goal 2?
Okay. Goal. Okay, go right ahead.
Although we're not experts in universal design for learning, I do want to say that is a consideration, all the choices we made. Interreading also has resources and ways for all students to access. The way we're designing small group instruction within the general education population has room for access. So although we're not formally trained, and we hope to do that, so everyone in the entire K through 12 community has that. It's in our thinking when we plan as we move forward with the choices we made recently in terms of literacy, in terms of instruction and professional learning.
And in terms of having a multi-sensory approach for teaching foundational literacy skills, science and reading.
As an OG.
Okay, good now for goal 3.
Mhm.
Okay, goal 3, developing a balanced definition of student success and vision of the graduate. So statutorily, students in grades 6 through 12 in the state of Connecticut should have a student success plan. And that is part of ensuring that all students have programming that will meet their needs for post-secondary success. So this is something, again, in my analysis, in my time here during public schools, an area where I would say we are behind in our work. Obviously, again, this past year was a lot of focus on the elementary level, K-3. I have to shift some focus there, 6-12. There should be a connection with student success plans and what's happening in our advisory and our school counseling program. So again, that's making sure that our students are ready for post-secondary success, whatever path they take. So while we want to, and just like this article that Dr. Byrne had us read was talking about Fullen's 6 C's, and thank you, Robin, I was so happy that someone made the connection to vision of the graduate there. While that's important, in the next iteration of our work is really ensuring that our curriculum outlines where in different subject areas and learning experiences can our children demonstrate progress using those higher order thinking skills, so that they're not just giving back content, but they're really demonstrating, for example, problem solving through curiosity and such. That's a piece of it. The other piece of it is this bit about the student success plans. So I will, the board can, be sure that I'll be coming back with Kathy Oster, our director of school counseling, and ensuring that we're communicating what those student success plans are. That should be, again, something that really strengthens school family community partnership and parent partnership. Parents should be heavily involved in a child's student success plan. So that would be something that I would like to see, and I would recommend we would add here as we evolve goal area 3.
Joanna?
I just want to say thank you for that. Especially when I was in CDSP a couple of years ago, a lot of commentary from parents was that there was no student success plan, or the transitional planning in general was very lacking. So this is a great step forward. Thank you.
I'm really passionate about that. I mean, aside from the fact that it is legislated, and I'm a mom of 4 very different kids, 4 different profiles of learners, it's I think what makes the work a little bit more tangible than saying like globally vision of the graduate. I think it really helps parents and kids see how they're applying those types of skills and how they're thinking forward, right, about their next steps always in learning. So thank you for that. Okay, but that's the big I think evolution of goal 3.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? No, okay.
And colleagues, please jump in anytime. Her goal area 4 is around expanding the professional capacity of staff. This reminds me of the article that we just read, thinking about how different actions that we take in different parts of our work are related to or have an impact on other areas, right? So the more we invest in the professional capacity of staff, that really, from a professional learning perspective, maybe on the teaching and learning side, there's a direct impact there to the human resource side, right? So that's where, like, how does the teaching and learning strategy match the HR strategy? How are we investing in our staff so that they're staying here, they feel that they're invested in, they're engaged in their own learning? So that has an impact to the fiscal side, right? When we're thinking about turnover, savings and such. So I just want to point that out, that this is in the strategic plan. Administratively, we should be able to have conversation with the board about how these parts of our work are connected and be demonstrating that. The professional capacity of staff, one of the things that we did this past year was implement the Aspiring Leader Program. And then March, if you have any comments about that, it was really well attended. We had, I think, more than about maybe 30 staff members from all grade levels, different schools. They've indicated interest of having a year too, and we'll have to consider, at what rate and pace do we continue something like that? Sometimes doing it annually, you run out of people, you wait 2 or 3 years. But I think that there might still be interest for a repeat cohort cohort to year one and this next year. One of my goals and hopes and focus areas and priorities for this goal would be how we leverage PDEC. I think one of the things that we tried to do last year was really focus on building teacher leadership and finding opportunities for teacher leadership in the district. Again, I think that's a way that you retain staff when you're engaging them and having autonomy and voice in the work. So one of the things I would like to do is involve PDEC, and Barry and I and Marge have all talked about this, and thinking about how we look at professional learning, how we do a needs assessment for professional learning, how we provide feedback for professional learning, and how we use some of the skill and expertise within the district to advance professional learning among our colleagues. So I think the role of PDEC in many school systems is really usually falls short, and it's just focusing on the teacher evaluation and administrator evaluation plan. Really, the intention is for it to be more robust and more focused on largely professional learning across the year, from goal setting to strengthen instructional practice through observations and other kind of trainings that we offer to our staff. So that's a way that I would like to see this goal evolve. And again, Marge and I have some work to do with our colleagues with regard to getting our Google use of forms and docs so that we can have a repository really for staff evaluation, because that's an important thing to have high quality written feedback. I don't know, Marge, do you have anything else you want to say about the goal form?
No.
Okay. I do want to thank not only the administration, but the board for the support and investment in instructional rounds. That has been really largely teacher-led and been successful in the schools as far as teachers learning from one another in practice. And that will continue. Goal area 5, this was where in June you heard about the elements of the communications plan that were embedded into this goal, similar as we did with the plan, the DEI plan. I think it's really wise to not have lots of plans out there and really consolidate and streamline the work. So that will continue. There are some things that, you know, happen or have already been taken care of, like Dr. Byrne mentioned before, finalizing the communication plan. So that should evolve differently in the next iteration of this strategic plan, what that looks like. There is some work with the website that's happening. We've talked about ensuring that, for example, when we think about the department chairs and their work with curriculum, I know we've had some conversation around the syllabi and different courses. So that's something I'll be talking with them about when they return in the fall, and something that we'll be working on over the course of the new school year, making those pieces of our work really transparent and accessible to kids and to families and to our staff, so that we all know what's happening. If you're in, you know, a global studies course, that shouldn't matter which teacher you have, there needs to be a shared experience and a common experience. While we also allow room for teachers to innovate, because we want to be continuing to improve practice classroom by classroom. So these goals, those communication goals will continue to be embedded here, and there is obviously some work with regard to policy that we heard from Attorney Lee before that we'll have to embed in the next iteration of this plan.
And Amy, if I could jump in, communication had come up in almost all of our conversations last week. And this is something that I'll be digging into shortly. We wanted to get to today and get everything laid out for a really productive retreat so far. And communication is an immediate top priority for me and to begin that process. So we'll be jumping into that pretty quickly and having further discussion.
Any questions on this goal? Okay, thank you, Amy.
Goal 6, improving school facilities for student safety. There's some information here around the emergency and safety planning. So I know that in Dr. Byrne's work with Leon and Rich, there will likely be an evolution of that action step for our administrative team. We've already discussed with these overarching board goals that are more systemic. Some of the more dance floor work or fire hose work, we'll have to have some updates here around not only HHR, but the evolution of this as indicated by, like, for example, the Middlesex project and what we just identified before, as far as adding on perhaps like the bus depot. So that might be something that we see. Goal area 6 is a very abbreviated one. So that's probably the big shift in the next evolution of the work for goal 6.
Okay, keep going, please.
All right, goal area 7, improving technology to support teaching and learning. And I did hear Dr. Byrne before talk about kind of looking at technology from the infrastructure kind of hardware side and also the instructional side. And that's something that I feel like Mr. McGuire has really, he's presented to the board many times, and I think the board has asked really great questions. Technology is obviously ever evolving and something that this goal should evolve as well, but something I think that we need to be committed to being okay with our work. Like this is messy work, right? Instructional technology is not static and it's moving really quickly. One of the things that I would like to say here is with regard to AI, and I think Greg, you were just asking about this, we do have AI guidance that again is as good as the technology today, which who knows 6 months from now how drastically different that could look. That needs to be an ongoing conversation with administration, our staff and the board. However, we also have to think about how we're talking with parents, staff and children about the implications of AI and the impact to teaching and learning. So that would be something that I would expect would evolve differently in this goal. Additionally, we had talked about here, and I had mentioned before, the library media work and the Learning Commons. We have some work to do in the area of technology and STEM, especially also with the gifted programming, which has been largely really humanities based. We did revise curriculum this past summer. Actually, there was a curriculum team working this past week on the library media curriculum so that we'll have a scope and sequence for elementary curriculum when we start library media, when we start the new school year. And we have had pretty extensive training in Aspen for administration, and that should continue. One of the things that I think we need to pay attention to is ensuring that we're cross-training staff so that more than one person knows how to do something when it comes to something as major as, you know, using the software to implement the schedule. So that is something that needs to be a focus in the year ahead. And I think we're also, Rich and I with the tech department kind of looking at, are there any other capabilities in Aspen that we just have not utilized yet that might create some more coherence and streamline some other parts of our work? For example, how we house and store data, student data. So that's something that we'll be looking into the year ahead. And the 7B is more the infrastructure and hardware stuff, which is super important, but far less interesting to me. I like the instructional side. I'm happy to take any questions on goal 7.
Dave.
So I guess 2 questions. One is looking at the infrastructure. Rich, when we look at the tech number, do you bifurcate this out in terms of what's stuff that lives in the walls and stuff that people carry around and use?
We do. I mean, a lot of what we need are the things that people carry around.
Okay.
But there are the things on the walls like more access points, like things in the ceiling, things like that we do need that are on the replacement site.
Would that be a heavy lift to?
Yeah.
And then, Amy, I guess going back to the conversation we had about AI a month or so ago, I forget when we had that presentation, a lot of us focused on just sort of watching and seeing what's going on and what people are doing. Do you have any thoughts on like when maybe we should get our hands dirty and innovate and play around a little bit?
So I know that there were some things that during even the budget process, we had wanted to explore, but didn't quite make it. I would say that, you know, we are getting our hands messy and working. Some teachers are doing that more comfortably than others. So when you say, are you thinking that it would be helpful for the board to see some of what we're doing in classrooms?
I'm just curious because a lot of that conversation was, well, we're watching and we're seeing and we're like, you know, I'm happy to hear that some teachers are getting in there and innovating and playing around. And I guess, you know, you do want to watch and learn and study. You want to say we're doing all AI curriculum tomorrow, like that probably would be bad. So
Thanks for recognizing.
I appreciate that. I've been here a while, so it's rubbing off. But no, seriously, the question is like, are we going to start trying to get people to have more familiarity, get people to innovate, get people more comfortable? Or are we still just not there? What are you thinking about that timeline? Because I'm not saying we should go headlong into anything, but I'm just can't watch forever. As you mentioned, it's evolving pretty quickly.
Right. So, if we're watching forever, we're going to miss it.
Right.
We're going to be left behind. So, I think one of the things that I would like to talk with Dr. Byrne and the rest of our administrative colleagues about is also how we can engage with students as partners to help, you know, students can lead the way in a lot of that, effort. So I certainly wouldn't say this should be just a sit back and watch year. I think that, you know, thinking about innovating, but again, I'd like to see how we engage students as partners in that.
I would suggest that, and not knowing anything about where we are with AI yet, we need to, at least if we have not yet, establish the framework and guidelines from which any work in AI would occur. There are some natural safeguards around privacy that exist in some places that in AI don't with some platforms. So there are some that are very specific to the educational space. And I think we want to clarify what those are first. So what are our values? What is consistent with the vision of a graduate? What are our guidelines going forward? And if we can put those things together, that could be helpful in launching any kind of innovation and experimentation in AI while protecting students' privacy and making sure it's completely appropriate for any kind of use.
So just to follow up, if I may, on that, we've been talking about privacy, we've talked about licenses, we've talked about software that's used and what goes where and where does student data go, who owns it, what's going on with the different vendors. That's been a conversation for a long time around here, so I appreciate your concern there. I guess what I would ask is, do you see, or I guess what I should also add is we do have policies regarding student privacy and other things up at the board level. Obviously, there's administrative policies. Are you thinking this is an admin initiative initially, or are we looking for the board to do policies to guide that as a first step?
I would think more, I'll certainly look at the board policies, but I think it's more guidelines for how to use. I don't necessarily think it's needing additional board
Okay.
policies.
Thank you.
And in fairness, that those those guidelines, I should say, those guidelines have been drafted, but have not been really socialized as much with the staff, other than the staff that helped to develop them. So we have work to do in that area.
I think the board, to Dave's questions, the board would value knowing that there is a pretty systematic approach in this area. And I think it needs to be reflected pretty clearly in the strategic plan. Thank you. Oh, sorry, guys. Greg and then Katie.
Just along the same lines on the AI topic, I do think, I don't know if it's a board thing or an administrative thing, just in terms of developing an actual philosophy around AI and how we want to approach it, I think is probably the first step before we start forming policies and things like that.
I agree with you. I think that has to be within the, or at least as part of the conversation around guidelines that I agree you have to start there.
Katie?
That was my clarification question as well. If we were talking about academic use of AI, something specifically to put in front of students, whether it's something for staff as well, and just kind of like what we think that
It
framework.
should all come from there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because there may be incredible applications of AI that we could use on an administrative and operations side of things that don't require that same level of analysis before we put an application in the hands of kids. So I think that vision, that sort of, those guidelines are critically important before jumping to anything.
Good. Anything else on this topic? Dennis?
On just this topic or the overall plan?
Go away, fire away.
So my question is to Dr. Burnham that, the plan we've developed or we have, is there anything missing or things you don't think we need to have here? And then B, going back to the self-evaluation, one of the comments was that we have a vision of 5 years, our 5 years is up. What are we doing? To me, this is a living document, and I don't think enhancing teaching and learning, having safe facilities are going to change in the next 5 years. So how do we work with a strategic plan that has, that should it have an expiration date, or should it just be massaged every year or so?
That is a great question and one that's quite philosophical in the world of people's beliefs around strategic planning. Some school leaders will say we need to start from scratch every year. As you already heard, as I was talking about the goals, to me, strategic plans, goals, they all evolve, and then they should not change much. If one of the lines in one of the sections today was it included the words focus, focus, focus in the same sentence. I don't know if you all recall seeing that. But what ends up causing trouble for school districts and boards of education is we end up playing whack-a-mole with everything. And what we need to do, and that's why you would want a strategic plan, is to be very clear and narrow in what our work is and how we're going to go about doing it. So to me, if I was the person that was saying, all right, we need to update the strategic plan for 2026, I would start with the existing plan, see where are we with did we accomplish everything that we set out as a goal? And are we able to say this is something that should move out of the plan and something else replaces it? But it would be through an analytical process to make that determination. So hopefully that answers that part of the question.
I think, but like, my question is, you think that you would ever have enhanced teaching and learning, or you need to get rid of enhanced teaching and learning?
I would
And
never,
security of
no.
Building facilities and making sure that they're up to date. I mean, to me, those are bedrocks of education.
I agree with you 100%. And that gets to the debate of what are regular goals that you should have as a school district versus do you need something like a strategic plan in this structure? And I think that's an approach that someone decided at some point 5+ years ago that we're going to do this. So I think that's a later conversation. With regard to, do I think anything's missing? I don't know the answer to that yet. My guess is, in looking at the range of goals, just about anything we would need to do as a school district could fall in one of those buckets in one of those areas within these strategies. The reality is, are we missing something? We probably are missing something in there, and that's something for us to figure out and add to it. And are there things that need to drop off? Sure, there are going to be things that need to drop off, but it should be a living document that can evolve that way naturally as you're going through it. But when you take a full sort of reevaluation and fresh look at a strategic, if it's every 5 years that you're updating it, it should be update and iterate, not unless you're getting rid of it completely and just sticking to regular goals. But I think that's a later conversation. But there's really good stuff in here. Really good stuff.
Okay, anything else on the strategic plan for the moment? Okay. All right, so this will come back. Thank you, Amy, for leading us through it. We'll move to an update on enrollment for the 2025-2026 school year, scheduling and discussion and possible action on setting elementary class sections. Rich.
So we are requesting to set 106 elementary classroom sections based on current enrollment. We would ask to have the ability for the superintendent to break 107th section between now and mid-August if one of those 4 sections that we highlighted that are close to tipping to tip. Currently, enrollment is down 21 students from last year. We did highlight, we had 126 withdrawals, which contributed to the reduction in enrollment. 94 were students moving to either private or parochial schools, and then 31 students who left the district. Overall, enrollment was down to projection by 69, and again, compared to last year, down 21. The one school district that did see a gain in enrollment was Royal, and that was largely driven in part to some of the new developments. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a couple of sections that are close to tipping. Holmes Kindergarten really is the one that, if we were to break a 107th section, it would likely be that is 1 student away from tipping. And typically, if you're going to add students at this stage of the game, it's probably going to be in kindergarten. Holmes 3rd, Holmes 4th, and then Tokenique 4th are all within 3 students of tipping. Overall, kindergarten ended up being 1 less than projected. First was 1 greater than projected, and 4th was 1 below projection.
Oh, sorry. Hey, Sarah, thank you.
So this is 1 under budget.
Correct. So 1 under budget with the caveat that if we do tip in one of those 4 sections that I mentioned, that the superintendent would have the ability to break to 107.
Okay, so I'm just clarifying for the motion that if we were to approve this, it's still a net neutral if we still add.
Joanna.
What if 2 tip?
So typically in the past, if that were to happen, we would break that second, right? So let's say if 2 sections in Holmes broke, kindergarten and 1st grade broke, we would tip. Superintendent would send out a notification that we've tipped and we've added to 108. We would carry one of those sections as a deficit because we've only budgeted 107. And then at some point during the year, we'd bring recommended transfers either in part or in whole, depending on how the year shook out to cover that section.
Thank you.
Katie.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if there were any additional details about the 51 students who are leaving MMS for private and parochial school.
So we don't have any specific reasons as to why they left. I would say in terms of the withdrawals, not necessarily just middle school, but across the 7 schools, it's about 15% higher than it has been in the past, which is why our net migration is down as opposed to previous years. So we have a reduction of students of 21. We were anticipating to be about +1, I think it was overall. So it is slightly higher. We do tend to see more students leaving the district for private or parochial schools in middle school as opposed to any of the others. Typically, it is in 8th grade when they're getting ready to go to high school. They might end up going to that private or parochial schools. The one grade that we actually see migration in typically is senior year, where they actually come back to get that Darien diploma. So that's the one grade where we see persistence ratios above 100, whereas in middle school, we do tend to see the persistence ratios below.
And
So-
I would just add in other districts now in Chappaqua, Rye, similar transition. We would have families that would move prior to middle school or right at middle school and then actually return to the district for high school. So it's not unheard of. I think it's worth investigating a little bit, but it is pretty common to see people choose to go to a different kind of setting for middle school and then come back to the district potentially beyond that.
I appreciate that context. I would be interested to know if we've broken out this number to see if it is in fact largely, 8th grade students who are going somewhere different for high school, or if there's another thing, especially given that the past 2 budget cycles have made some significant changes at the middle school level. I think this is an important checks and balance for us to just look and see, again, with that systems lens at like where we might be seeing effects of budgetary implications.
I don't know if we can draw a straight line to budgetary implications, but
I wasn't suggesting that it would be a direct causation, but I do think that we need to be looking at lots of places that it shows up, and I think that if there's an anomaly in particular, it's important for us to look and say
not why.
what factors might be contributing.
Sure. Dennis?
Is this the first year we've seen this granularity of detail on transfers to private school or no? Because I don't.
So we didn't, in the past, we've given like an aggregate number, like 100 students left and 100 came back in. We did break it out this year to include by school.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to get into the weeds, but to Katie's point about Middlesex, I'm curious about Ox Ridge being 11 students with a brand new school and all of that. And to me, I mean, it could be just 2 families decided to go to private school, so it's not a large number, but year-on-year trends, I'd be interested to kind of understand, why they're leaving and what we could do better to keep those children in school, or is it a lost cause for us to try to keep them, but to try to get to the underlying details. And I don't know if we ask those questions. Or is it just they've left and it's gone?
Yeah, I don't believe they usually say like, why are you leaving? It's usually I'm leaving because I'm, moving out of town, or I've decided to go to X, Y, and Z private school.
Yeah, these are moves also. It's not right. These are moves out of different districts.
No, there's a separate.
So there's another chart below it where it's
Oh,
31, we're actually leaving Darien. They've moved to another community.
But in terms of the persistence ratio, it's been higher than usual, right? We were having almost nobody move. This, again, there could be stuff in it. I'm not suggesting we should ignore it, but this looks more like a normal.
So it's about 15% higher than it has been typically in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Usually the migration in and the migration out are
Net.
relatively close. It was a little bit wider this year, I would say, than the last few years.
Okay, and most of that is the middle school number,
Correct. Though the middle school number is always
the high one.
the highest one of the school district.
Robin?
I'm just looking at the Darien High School, like 9th grade had a -31 variance. Was it a similar level for the 9th grade last year? Because I know a lot of kids also are reclassing more and more as they leave 8th grade and then they repeat 8th grade at a private school and then they come back. So I'm just wondering if that's also becoming a trend, because that's actually higher than the middle school. We had -7 in 6th grade, -7 in 7th.
So higher than projection, but I'd have to check what it was in the previous years.
I was just curious if that might be And that's something that you can't necessarily counteract potentially.
Okay, Joanna.
So I know we can't get the details of, why each family left, but it might be helpful just to have historical data. If it's 49, moved to the middle school, left the middle school last year, 51 this year, that's not much of a change. So if we could just have like 5 years.
Do we monitor the reclass phenomenon?
I think that's probably hard
Do
to,
we monitor the
Yeah.
reclassing? People.
Well,
who go-
you can see when they left and if they come
and then
back.
they
Come
come
back.
back.
It's like,
Yeah.
well, we weren't in the right or something.
I mean, I'm sure we could pull that data. I don't know if we actually like heavily monitor it, but I'm sure we could pull it.
But some don't come back, they just stay at a private school. So I mean, I think
Right.
that also
Correct.
is happening more and more at a high school level.
Okay. What else?
Oh, just one other
Yes.
question, Jill. With Royal, the 9 new students that were due to the new developments, did our projections, because usually they've been pretty on target with anticipating, how how fluctuations will change with the new developments. That seems like a pretty high.
It was a little higher than
Number?
anticipated.
Yeah,
In the past, and it's one of the reasons why Royal now broke a 4th section. Royal has historically been 3 sections, K through 5 for quite a period of time, I think my entire tenure here. So it was a little bit higher, and it's one of the reasons why you're actually seeing Royal kind of creep up to homes in terms of overall population.
I'm just raising it because from a budget perspective, as we go forward with the enrollment studies, just to make sure that we have.
Yep, so we would have
comfort that-
another enrollment study presented in November.
Okay, thank you.
Also, it's worth this group knowing that you build buildings on an 8-year projection. And so Royal is 2 classrooms less than everyone else. So if we continue to see growth in that building, they have only 22 classrooms. Everyone else has 24 general education classrooms. You can't overbuild. So that's the problem with new builds popping up in different areas is it sometimes it's just exciting to have a new building like Oxbridge and other times it's a change in the building makeup. Okay. Where do we, oh, do you have a motion, Sarah? I'll read it. We have a motion to approve 106 elementary class sections based on the current enrollment for the 2025-2026 school year. With the understanding that if a section pops, staff will respond accordingly. That's John, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Further discussion and proposed action on proposed schedule of 2026 regular Board of Education meetings and 25-26 subcommittee meetings. Okay, I think this is.
This is just a
Move
quick
our vote.
item, that's included in the packet, the meetings that were discussed prior to my arrival. Just, if that's the intention to move forward with these, they're all laid out.
Dave.
So stealing Greg's thunder, a little bit, just looking through notably at the subcommittee meetings. I mean, I was a strong proponent when we set up the subcommittees. And I think they've done great work. I just have to question, looking at the meeting count that we have, do we really need some of these every month? Or should we think about maybe a quarterly cadence for the subcommittees going forward?
Good question. I think facilities could go into a quarterly.
That was
cadence.
actually one of my questions about the goals, is that he said, the restructuring or something of streamlining the work of subcommittees. So that was one of my questions. the
Policy
cadence of
maybe
those.
too, because you're almost done with the audit, but you can
Yeah,
see.
I don't know if that works for finance. I mean,
No.
maybe a
No.
little more around budget time, but the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we do the monthlies,
Yeah, I
so,
think finance is monthly, but
Okay.
but I think.
but listen, they run 5 minutes at some time, so it's not that big of a lift.
So just throwing it out, and I guess since I opened the can of worms, just the overall meeting count. Maybe we could think about moving forward, and I don't know the right format, but this is a retreat, so I'm putting it out there. Maybe we should think about.
Overall.
Everybody knows my view.
Pardon?
I think everybody knows my view.
Katie?
I would not be in favor of reducing the number of curriculum meetings. I think that there's a lot of substance that goes on there. I think it's a great opportunity.
Great.
Facilities, I was frustrated this past year that we never held one. So if reducing the number means that we're gonna hold them, that would be great. But I do think that it's problematic to have a subcommittee that only exists on paper.
I think it's a good idea to move quarterly facilities to quarterly, because there's just not, it's not that big a lift right now. But just take a look at the cadence, because, for example, it's important to meet around the budget time, and then you'll have the middle school to think about also. Dave, maybe you could look at policy and talk to Marge and just see what's left on the audit and see if that could be a quarterly cadence. And then I would agree with leaving curriculum and finance. Yes, Robin?
I agree with curriculum and finance still monthly, because there is a lot that we do cover. But policy, we do apparently have all these new Connecticut laws that I believe policies are also going to be upcoming. So is it possible to just have the schedule, and then if you don't really need to meet, you can just cancel, or?
Or go the other.
We could do that, or we could spin one up.
I mean, we have to wait for Shipman and Goodwin. I just checked.
Right.
They don't have any of the updated policies yet. So as far as the audit goes, we're pretty much done. I spoke to Dr. Bird about a couple that are hanging, but until Shipman and Goodwin gets, we don't need to meet.
Okay.
You can add.
Okay, so in terms of taking a vote, I think we're fine on the regular Board of Ed meetings. And we can either do the tentative schedule of monthly committee meetings as amended, or we can bring it back another round and do a consent.
Why don't we,
Go
throw
ahead.
my ideas out, what if we can come back with the subcommittee to do quarterly for facilities and policy? And then if Dave and Marge decide that there are a lot of policies that the policy committee needs to look at, then we can throw a special meeting on. But I think, to me, that makes more sense.
I would agree with that.
So we're gonna approve it as amended with understanding.
Well, yeah, I mean, do we need the dates or do we not? Just, if we all understand that it's being amended quarterly, does that matter?
Okay, so let's have that one come back, and I'll just have a motion to approve the proposed schedule of 2026 regular Board of Education meetings.
And for the next meeting, we can have the other
Yeah.
adjusted.
So John is, and Joanna is a second. All those in favor, this is just for the regular meetings.
Just had a question on those.
On the regular meetings?
Yeah, I was just looking at the dates. Do we have a summer retreat scheduled for that? Is that one of those meetings?
We used,
We have June 23rd and I see July 28th. and
so
August 25th.
that's what we did last year, was we just used that. So this year,
One
this
of
was the
those.
date. July 22nd was our July meeting. So it would be July 28th next year, if you do it the same way, but the retreat
That's
is,
what I was asking. Is that just, is it a regular meeting or is it the retreat? Are we?
yeah, it's a good question. We've changed the practice without changing the calendar. So we always did have a meeting at the end of July, and that's what this is. The retreat is a different meeting, which is why it's warned as a special meeting.
So do we need both?
Yeah, different people feel differently about that, I think, from what I understand, but Joanna, did you have something?
Oh, I was just gonna say that, the past couple of years, what Dr. Adley had done was just collapse the regular meeting and the special meeting.
Right.
But I, think we could wait to decide to do that, to see where we are as a board, depending on what's going on next year.
My suggestion would be to anticipate that you want to have a retreat and thinking about the structures we talked earlier with your new superintendent. I think that will be critically important. And then have a meeting for agenda item purposes as a separate occurrence. So whether it's that you have the retreat in the day and then you have a special meeting at the end of it and you do the agenda items that you need to, I think that would be a good consideration. But I do think you want to plan for a retreat with your new leader for next year.
That also, Dr. Burr, would you mind just like you've been in a lot of board meetings, is this cadence similar to what you've seen?
Twice a month, yeah. Yeah, there are some that I've seen once a month in some places, but in districts similar to Darien, it's typically twice a month.
Robin?
The July meeting is next year. Could you move it to July 21st? Because that would be 4 weeks after the June meeting. And also, I don't know, it just seems like in the past years, that's been more of the timing of if it does turn into an all-day retreat as well. Just question.
If people want to move it to the 21st, we can.
Or not.
It's on the 4th. It's the 4th week, yeah, because usually what
It's
they
4
do was
weeks after.
with the 2 and a 4 week cadence, they do the 4th week of the month and the second
Yeah.
week of the month.
But
So
it's fine. It's fine.
And there's definitely saying with whoever the new superintendent is next year,
Yeah.
that we can't change that. I think that-
You can change it.
Yeah.
You can just bring it back and change it if you need to. You just need 30 days to keep it a regular meeting. Okay, so I'll finish the vote. All those in favor? Oh, this is just the
Just the
regular
Or
meeting
the
schedule.
Regular meeting.
So that's Stevie, parent. Oh, it's everybody. Okay. All right, the committee schedule will come back next month. Okay, the update on the board member handbook.
So we had a conversation, Katie and I had a conversation. We're going to have a follow-up meeting. I've actually got my hands on some other Board of Education handbooks to do a comparison of, and then we'll come back to the board. I think we're looking at, it's either next week or the week after, that we have some tentative times on the calendar to have that conversation. And then we'll be back to the rest of the board.
All right, personnel report, Marge.
So personnel report, we're dealing with many fewer vacancies this year, and we have filled all but 5 right now. The biggest area for us right now where we're having difficulties is special education and support services, specifically the social worker. We did fill a psychologist, and unfortunately, I just got a text from Westport that they're taking one of our elementary teachers. So the hiring season is not over yet, but special education is a shortage area in extreme this year.
Okay, how many spots do we have open? Do we know?
2 at the high school with the rumor of a 3rd and one at the school.
Okay.
Can I just say?
Yes, go ahead.
What are the turnover implications, Rich, right now, as you're looking at?
In terms of dollar wise?
Yeah.
We're pretty close. We're a little short, primarily because the middle school 2 teachers would leave through the 4 to the 5. Currently math has met that target, Spanish has not yet. So that area is a little bit short, but we're pretty close to where we expect to be. But we have 5 more outstanding, so there's certainly a chance.
So turnover savings written on budget.
We're pretty close.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Follow-up action items. So it's in here. That's it. From the last time, we added a fall update to the, on the, about the middle school schedule. Dr. Burns going to take a look at religious holiday protocols and follow up probably with a memo to start, just to understand how that gets handled in other spots. And then we just talked about the board handbook. There were a couple of things from today.
Subcommittees coming back.
Subcommittees coming back. Cass, do you have a list there? Yeah.
I don't have it.
Right there. Okay,
But yes, I
that's
did
fine.
take
Well, we'll
notes.
just take a look next meeting and make sure that it's all there. Thank you for taking notes. All right, public comment, but as a reminder with the technical issues that we were experiencing today, we are only taking public comment from those in the room. And we actually don't have anybody in the room. So I will move, thank you again to everybody who attended today, staff and the board. And I'll have a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussion concerning non-affiliated employees' contracts pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1206A. Sarah, seconded by Joanna. All those in favor. That is your